Welcome back to another Farm to School cooking video. I'm Rachel, this is my kitchen, and today we're going to be making a garden salad with a honey Dijon vinaigrette and flatbread. We're going to start by mixing up our flatbread because it then has to rest for 20 minutes, and while it's resting we're going to make our salad and dressing, and then we'll come back and cook our flatbread, and that is what we'll do today. So the first thing we're going to do is measure flour out for our bread. And our recipe calls for 1.5 cups of flour, which will make about 5 flatbreads. So 1.5 cups of flour, and then to that we're going to add some baking powder. We're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of salt. A quarter teaspoon of salt. So that's our dry ingredients. Now, this recipe has 2 directions you could take it. If you have Greek yogurt, like I do, you can add 3/4 cup of Greek yogurt. To my dry ingredients, I'm going to add a cup of Greek yogurt. And in the recipe that I sent home with the recipe kits, there's a substitution for the Greek yogurt of water and oil, which you can use if you don't have Greek yogurt on hand. Okay, so we're just going to mix that up. And you might have to get in there with your fingers. If it's extremely sticky, you can always add a little more flour. So my dough is really sticky, so I'm going to turn it out onto a lightly floured surface here and kind of squish it together until I get a blob. You want it to all kind of coalesce into a nice slightly sticky but workable dough. Okay, so it's a nice little ball of dough, and we're going to put that back in our bowl and let it sit for 20 minutes while we make our salad and dressing. We're going to make a nice farm fresh garden salad. I have some greens here. Mine are spinach and baby kale and some baby chard. And to that I'm going to add some radishes sliced up and some peas. So I'm just going to break off a couple of radishes. I don't like a lot, so I'm only going to do a few. Cut the ends off. And radishes are really rolly, so make sure you're holding them firmly. Set that aside. And then I'm going to put the flat side of the radish down on my cutting board and just slice it. Like so. And I'll put the flat edge that I cut down. Slice it nice and thin. Like so. So we're going to put that in our salad. And we're going to do some peas. And with peas, it's good to break off the end where they were attached to the plant. And then if they're stringy, it'll just kind of peel off with it. And kind of get rid of that. And I like peas better than I like radishes, so I'm going to do more of those. Okay. And I'm kind of going to grab a few and line them up and then just cut them into chunks. Okay. And you can add lots of things to a salad. So if you have carrots, you can add carrots, or you can add cucumber, tomatoes, whatever you want you can add to your salad. And you could add things that aren't vegetables too, like sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds or cheese or dried raisins or craisins, lots of things. So there's our salad. And now we're gonna make a dressing. So now we're gonna make our dressing in this little jar. And we're gonna talk a little bit about emulsifiers. Emulsifiers are important ingredients in oil and vinegar dressings that help the oil and vinegar stick together. Oil and water don't like to mix, but when we eat our salads, we want all of our flavors mixed together and not separated. So our recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar, 1, 2, and a 1/4 cup of oil. And you will notice that those 2 things don't mix. So you can see that the oil sits on top of the vinegar, and vinegar is mostly water, and they don't mix. And if I put the lid on my jar very tightly and shake it up, it mixes for a minute, but if we wait for a few seconds and watch, the oil will start to separate from the vinegar. It's been about a minute, and you can see that our oil and vinegar are definitely separating. There's already about, I don't know, 1/4, half an inch of oil sitting on top of the vinegar, and it's growing. So, and we're gonna add a few other ingredients into our dressing, both for flavor and to help the oil and vinegar stick together. We're going to add 1/2 tablespoon of honey, and a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. Oh, wow, of Dijon mustard. Okay, so mustard is our emulsifier in this dressing, and it contains an ingredient called lecithin or lecithin, I don't know. That is actually added with the intention of keeping mustard from separating into water and oil. And so it'll also work on our salad dressing. Emulsifiers have hydrophilic and lipophilic properties. Hydrophilic means water loving. So hydro is water and philic is loving. And lipophilic, or I don't know how you pronounce that, but lipophilic is fat loving. Lipo is fat, like liposuction, and philic is loving. So these emulsifiers, things like mustard, love both water and the oil in our dressing. And when we shake it up with the mustard in there, it helps to attract both those water molecules and those oil molecules, and it holds them together long enough for us to eat our salad without having everything separate. And if you look at our dressing now, you can see that the oil and vinegar are totally separated already. So we're going to add a little salt and a little pepper. And I'll put my lid back on there and shake it up real good. You could do an experiment at home and combine oil and vinegar in one jar, shake it up, and time how long it takes it to separate, and then combine it with an emulsifier like mustard and see what the difference is. So you can see that that's almost a creamy looking dressing. So I'm gonna pour some of that over my salad. And we'll toss that up, and that'll be good to go with our flatbread. Here's our dough. It's just been sitting for 20 minutes. And I'm going to start by lightly flouring my counter so it doesn't stick too bad when I'm rolling out the flatbreads. So just put a little flour and then spread it out a little bit. So I'm gonna roll my dough into a log. This is the best way to divide it evenly into portions. And then you can cut it into however many portions you want, because you can make your flatbreads little or big, it's up to you. And maybe it's up to how many people you're serving with this. If you have 6 people in your family, you might want to make 6 flatbread or 4 or whatever. So I'm going to cut it in half first, and then I'm going to cut each half into 3 pieces to make 6. So I'm going to take my first one, and with my hands I'm just going to kind of start making it into a circle. And the middle part where I cut is stickier than the outside, so I'm going to make sure that there's some flour on that so it doesn't stick too much to my cutting board. And I'm going to use a rolling pin to just make it nice and flat. And we want them to be about 1/8 of an inch thick, not very thick. There you go. So that's how you're gonna roll them out. You're gonna cook them in a pan over medium-high heat. I'm using a cast iron pan because that's what we have around here, but you can use a nonstick skillet or whatever you have at home. And you wanna preheat your pan just a little bit and put just a little oil in it. Not very much. And you just want your pan to be hot before you put your flatbread in it. But make sure you don't leave a hot pan over the burner for too long. I can feel the heat coming off my pan now, so I'm gonna put my flatbread in there. And we're gonna cook it for maybe about 2 minutes on each side until they're spotted and brown. You can see that our flatbread has puffed up a little bit. It's starting to look fluffy. And I'm gonna flip it, and this is still a little pale on this side, but it'll get some color on the other side. Our flatbread is done now, and you can see that it has some really nice color on there. So I'm gonna set that here to cool and start another one in my pan. And here's my salad. And, oh, that's pretty warm. Okay, here we go. Garden salad. Really good job on the dressing, if I do say so myself. With some nice warm flatbread. Well, I hope you guys enjoy making this recipe this week and enjoy getting some fresh spring vegetables. We'll see you next week with whatever we're making in my kitchen here. Happy quarantine.